Well, it's expected Robert Mugabe will be inaugurated as president sometime on Sunday, and he's told the world to stay out of his country's affairs.
But the international community remains split on how to deal with Zimbabwe. The Americans want sanctions, but African countries aren't convinced. Hanna reports now from Johannesburg.
There is one topic of conversation as African foreign ministers meet: how to deal with what Robert Mugabe's followers have described as a resounding victory in an uncontested election. Mugabe himself due to arrive here in Sharm el-Sheikh for an African Union Heads of State meeting on Monday. And early indications that despite the rhetoric of recent weeks, he will still be engaged, not rejected. That punitive measures such as sanctions are unlikely to be taken.
History has shown us that they don't work, because the leadership just dig in and feel persecuted and do even worse things. I think we must engage Zimbabwe. The route of sanctions may not be the helpful one.
A government of coalition should be formed from both the government and the opposition to run the country. I think the example we did in Kenya is a very good example, and we were looking forward that our Zimbabwean brother will follow that example.
Robert Mugabe says he will be magnanimous in victory, the precise word used, and will be prepared to talk. Opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai, however, says he will not talk, following what he regards as a declaration of war rather than democratic process.
They need each other to move the political process forward. I think the Southern African Development Community's position has been around creating a compromise in Zimbabwe, but I think the deal breaker here is basically who convenes the compromise, who convenes the government of national unity, who convenes the transitional authority.
For months now, South African President Thabo Mbeki has been attempting to forge a power-sharing agreement in Zimbabwe. As the official mediator in the crisis, he's refrained from apportioning blame or being publicly critical. The South African government as a whole has only gone so far as to condemn the violence. ANC President Jacob Zuma, not a member of government, has been far more vocal, describing the situation as out of control and holding Mugabe himself to account. Yet even he wants dialogue.
If countries ill-treat their citizens, and their citizens would do a number of things, and it will impact on the neighbors. And I don't think we want that situation. That's why we are calling for a political arrangement that must help solve the situation in Zimbabwe for the good of all of us.
Newspapers in South Africa reflect the anger and frustration expressed through much of the continent and further afield. But the stark reality is, despite the criticism, despite losing an election earlier this year, Robert Mugabe remains in power. Hanna, Al Jazeera, Johannesburg.